From the European Parliament in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight, and this is what we have for you on the program: least worst option. British MPs try to break the Brexit deadlock in a series of high-drama votes. The outsiders, both Slovakia and Ukraine, choose leaders with no political experience. Policing Facebook, why the social media giant is calling for more government regulation. Forget immigration. Some European countries say citizens leaving is the bigger issue. And rejection complex. A tough couple of weeks for Theresa May in tonight's Raw Moment. Okay, so it is time to meet our panelists this evening. We have Darren McCaffrey, our political editor at Euronews. Darren, what story are you watching?
Well, yet again, it looks like another week in which all our politics are dominated by Brexit.
What else?
We've got a series of votes today. Potentially, Mrs May bringing back her deal on Wednesday, and renewed speculation that she could be gone by the end of the week. It looks like MPs tonight, though, might back Brexit with Brie.
Ooh, what is Brexit with Brie?
Yeah, I'll explain that later on.
We'll talk about it later. All right, and also joining us tonight, Mark Demesmaeker. He is a Belgian MEP with the European Conservatives and Reformist groups. What about you, Mark?
Well, very interesting.
Now you got your attention, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the funding, I'll be happy to reflect on that.
You're talking about Christian groups linked in the US. All right, we'll talk about that as well later on. Okay, joining us tonight, also Esther Zalan. She's a journalist with the EU Observer. What about you, Esther? What are you watching tonight?
I'll pick the emigration. I'm from Hungary, so it's one of the countries affected by professionals leaving the country, but it's a very complex and politically toxic issue. It's not only has to do with freedom of movement, obviously, education opportunities in the home countries. So it's
Are you one of them?
I have to admit, I'm one of them, yes.
All right, but tonight we start with Brexit, the biggest story, as Darren was saying. Well, today is April the 1st, so it is really tempting to start the show with an April Fool's joke about Brexit, but sadly, the farcical direction Brexit has taken over recent weeks has not left satire much to work with. What can we do? This afternoon, MPs will take control of Parliament again, trying to find a solution that Parliament can unite around. Now, it's all against a backdrop of a possible cabinet coup, rumours of a general election, and the prospect of a fourth vote on Theresa May's deal. But first, let's hear what Conservative MPs think about the week ahead.
Members of Parliament won't vote for no deal, and indeed no deal would be bad for our economy and bad for the union. But also staying in a customs union or accepting the single market would mean that some of the manifesto pledges that were made at the general election would be compromised.
Well, the Prime Minister has said that she will listen to the House. And one of the reasons we are in this difficulty, I mean, it's another very serious week, is because of the numbers in the House. MPs just have one vote each, and we have to find a way of delivering on Brexit.
My concern is that the Prime Minister is more concerned to avoid a no-deal Brexit than anything else. And therefore I am very concerned that she could decide to go for a customs union tacked onto her deal. But if that happens, people like me will just continue campaigning to get us out of this customs union.
All right, so we are joined now from Westminster by correspondent Vincent McAveen to give us more insight on what is going on in London. Vincent, good to see you there. Now, it's another big day for Brexit. We seem to keep saying this, but it does seem like history in the making. Can you talk us through what we can expect tonight?
Yeah, yet another big day for Brexit, Tessa. It feels like we're saying that pretty much every week now. MPs are in the House of Commons at the moment, starting this debate on the other options for Brexit. Then tonight at around 8 o'clock they will finish up that debate, local time. They'll once again be presented with those green slips of paper to do these indicative votes. Now, the Speaker hasn't yet selected the amendments that they will be voting on, the options they'll be voting on. We know that last week they had 8 options. They voted against all of them to different degrees. Tonight we're expecting them to have 3 or 4. That's not fully confirmed yet. They'll then have that half-an-hour window to vote, yes or no, or abstain from whichever ones they like. And then they'll be counted again. They have 90 minutes to count them, and we should be getting a result around 10 o'clock local time on what it is that MPs want to do.
Okay, so there are several options that we have on the table. Do stay with us, Sir Vincent. Let's first have a closer look at those Brexit options that had the most support from MPs last week. So the first one, the least unpopular plan, was that Britain should remain in the customs union. It only lost by 8 votes. It commits the government to negotiating a permanent and comprehensive UK-wide customs union with the EU for any Brexit deal, while the second most popular plan was the idea of a public vote or a second referendum. That lost by a margin of 295 votes to 268, and it means that the public would be given the chance to vote on any Brexit deal before it can be finally signed off by Parliament. So, Vincent, when we look at all, the other options, is there any sense that MPs are uniting around one single option, or is there still a fundamental divide?
There really doesn't seem to be any big trend behind one option. One thing that we have heard, though, is Labour apparently will be supporting the Common Market 2.0 idea. That would see them giving up their pledge in their last manifesto to end freedom of movement. And it also calls into question why they're supporting that when their official position now is to back the second referendum, according to their own party policy. But we know Labour, of course, has been quite muddled when it comes to this. But when you look across the MPs in all parties, this is the real issue with Brexit. It is such a mixed-up issue. There are people in all parties who support all the different kinds of things, and it's so hard to get all 650 of them together behind one of these. So we'll see in the coming hours whether or not the debates in Parliament show that some MPs have changed their mind or not. But I think tonight, with that reduced number of options, we might see the customs union idea that did the best last week maybe just getting enough. But don't forget that on the third vote on Theresa May's withdrawal agreement on Friday, her withdrawal agreement still beat the options that were put to MPs in these indicative votes last Wednesday. So it still is far from clear what Parliament actually wants.
All right, thank you for that, Vincent McAviney. So let's start with what Vincent was saying, that Theresa May's plan still beat the other options that were put on the table. So does it mean a fourth vote is really possible and Theresa May's deal is not dead?
Well, it is possible tonight, of course, that MPs will yet again still not manage to actually back an alternative plan. But the thought process, if they do, and at the moment it does seem that Britain staying inside the customs union is probably the most likely of those scenarios. When I was talking about Brexit with Bree, it was what Vinny referenced, which is this idea of a common market 2.0, essentially Britain staying inside not just the customs union, but also the EEA, the European
Which is what the Labour Party is going to be backing.
It's what the Labour Party are backing. It's controversial in the UK in the sense that it would mean the free movement of people continuing, considering many people thought that the referendum was a referendum not just on Europe, but also on immigration. That might be troublesome for Labour. But yes, the idea is whatever one comes out on top will then be put to MPs on Wednesday as a playoff between that and Theresa May's deal. A fourth potential attempt for her to try and get her deal through. Her thought process and Downing Street's thought process, Tessa, is that will then give a stark contrast to those Brexiteer MPs, that actually it is either a softer form of Brexit, staying inside the customs union, or May's deal, which many of them might view. I still think in those circumstances, even if that does happen, those MPs who've always voted against May's deal will continue to...
How many times did you put it to a vote, actually, just for clarity? How many times? May's deal, how many times?
Well, this will be the fourth attempt. Okay. Essentially the fourth attempt. Yeah.
OK, so if we're looking at... Mark is there shaking his head. If we're looking at the
I try my best. I mean, I'm trying my best here.
Looking intently, but if we're looking at the most possible, most likely, we're talking about the customs union here. Is this the best possible deal, apart from what is being called as the best deal, which is May's deal? So is the customs union the most likely now, and is it good for the EU?
Looking from my perspective, living in a country, I'm playing a home match here, I'm Flemish, which would be hardest hit in case of a hard Brexit after Ireland and together with the Netherlands, let's say. I'd say that would be the best of the
best of the worst.
Of the worst, yes, because well, it would eliminate, of course, the customs and all the burdens for our businesses and companies who have an intensive trade with the UK and who live in very uncertain times now. A lot of them preparing for the worst case scenario, but hoping just for this to happen. Let them keep into the customs union. I think for us that would be a fine solution, if you can speak about a solution. Also for the Irish problem, I think, for the border in Ireland, that would be a more or less fine solution. Would be a good deal there.
I think also for the EU, this would be the easy way out in a sense. I mean, Barnier said last Friday, I think, that it would take 48 hours for the EU to rewrite the political declaration that foresees this customs union.
Yeah, interesting. He did that an hour before the vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
But also the Tusk and Juncker and other leaders have been also hinting that, you know, if we can change the political declaration in no time, and this was the opening. Come this way, have the opposition Labour MPs come on board and reach across the aisle and find a solution behind customs union.
Yeah, it's but again, of course, that's not what the Conservatives want. I'm in the same group as the Tories here, and you hear there. But we have chosen to regain our independence, and we want to make our trade deals ourselves. But then, yeah.
But
the question about the customs union, though, is this because, first of all, we know what the customs union is, and so, you know, it is kind of pre-packed in a sense. It does mean they could change the political declaration quickly, which might suit the UK, but also suit Europe, because I'm trying to work out on the timeline here of choreography whether actually, if Britain did opt for this in the next couple of days, whether then that means something could be delivered by the end of next week, which ultimately means that Britain can still leave the European Union and not take part in the EU elections, which clearly everyone here in Brussels and in lots of parts of Europe are very, very keen to avoid.
Just to pick up on your reaction earlier, Mark, you were like staring at Darren, listening. So you were saying, what is happening in the UK? Well, heading into this week, there isn't much positivity, in fact, coming from the EU side, pretty much a reaction of what is going on. European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, he spoke to Italian TV yesterday saying, quote, "We have had a lot of patience with our British friends over Brexit, but patience runs out," end quote. So is that, what is he trying to say? As direct as you can there.
Well, I think there is an awful lot of frustration and there is an awful lot of concern. It goes beyond frustration, somewhat anger. The Deputy German Foreign Minister described Brexit in a word I cannot use on their family-friendly television today, very undiplomatically in some ways. Yes, do Google it. And there is, I think, kind of anger and frustration about where this process is and concern about what next. What Europe does not want is Brexit to consume every next EU Council meeting, to consume continuous debate in this Parliament and elsewhere. And as Manfred Weber and others will put it, that maybe it becomes infectious, that somehow kind of the Brexit disease, in a sense, starts to travel elsewhere throughout Europe. So, you know, people here are very, very concerned that they want to nip this in the bud.
Well, I think it's a problem and it's a crisis of British politics. And it's about party politics.
It is also, to a degree, European politics.
Yes, of course, but the way it has been handled now the last 2 years, we see a lot of confusion within the political parties itself. For me, as a Flemish politician, where we have a completely other
you do have your squabbles here too, though.
Okay, but when you're part of a party and you're an MP or an MEP, okay, you have your debates within your party, but once your debates are finished and you have set your line, you go for that line. That is not the case in Britain. Neither the Labour, neither the Conservatives. My friends here in my group will not like to hear this, but we have 19 members, 19 completely different opinions. So Europe
feels more like a spectator here in what is going on in the UK. All right, let's move on, because immigration may have been a big factor for many of those who voted for Britain to leave the EU, to do Brexit. But according to a new report, actually, many of those in Europe are more worried about people leaving their country than those arriving. That and more in today's Ballot Buzz. What are you more worried about? Is it people coming to your country or those who want to leave? Well, according to a new poll by the European Council on Foreign Relations, it all comes down to geography. While those in Northern and Western Europe were found to be more concerned about immigration, those in the South and the East were found to fear emigration, even favoring controls to stop people leaving for too long.
Our EPP sitting candidate for President of the European Commission, Manfred Weber.
From one president to another, current Commission head Jean-Claude Juncker has given the green light to candidate hopeful Manfred Weber. In a personalized video, he wished the newcomer luck against the, quote, capitalists, populists, and simplifiers. And it seems he might just need it. That's after an investigative report found that right-wing groups in the US had spent over 55 million euros financing their European counterparts, lobbying EU officials and supporting, quote, ultra-conservative agendas. The report comes as thousands march in Italy against a Congress encouraging the natural family. All right, I'll go back to you, Mark, because we were talking about this before the show, and what caught your attention was the financing from, Christian groups with supposed links to Trump. This was an investigation by Open Democracy. What do you think about that? Is that a danger that is on the radar of Europe?
Well, I think we must be.
Or do we even call it a danger?
Well,
what is it?
I want to have clarity about this. It's always a danger. We have had the meddling from the Russian Federation. We know that they are sponsoring far-right parties.
So you believe this is a direct attempt to influence the election?
It could be, yes, and we have to be aware of this. And this is, I don't like fundamentalist groups, whether they are Islamic or they are Christian. I don't like this kind of groups, and if they are. It can always have an influence when you invest money, try to influence campaigns and try to support campaigns that try to.
I think what's really interesting is the European election being in the middle of a lot of eyes looking at how how they can take part in it. You've been looking into this story as well. What do you make of it?
Yes, I think it's very interesting, and also, I mean, any sort of foreign funding is problematic. I mean, in most EU countries, it's actually against the law. So, in terms of legality of these funds
there's that question, because I think about 40 MEPs are asking for it to be investigated by Timmermans.
Yeah, indeed, they've written a letter saying that they want to look into this further. But you're right; it's this real sign of what a battleground European Union and European politics has become.
And what's interesting to you, Darren, we were talking about this also earlier, is the fact that it's not actually immigration, but emigration. I think that's an interesting
I think it is, and it's something that actually hasn't really been picked up an awful lot. Clearly, we have seen mass-scale immigration into Europe in the last couple of years, but within Europe itself, we've also, for the last couple of decades, seen an awful lot of immigration from certain parts to others. And, as someone who grew up in Ireland, in rural Ireland, a country scarred for centuries because of emigration. When you see your towns and your villages disappear, when you see schools close and football teams come to an end simply because there are not enough kids or families there to support these places, that is equally a troublesome place for communities to find themselves in, as it is for outsiders to come and join them. So it is something that particularly affects now Eastern Europe.
And I think Romania was trying to do an effort to keep people.
I know, I mean, hundreds of thousands, to the point where certain countries are facing a demographic kind of nightmare in the future about not being able. It's why Viktor Orban, for example, wants more Hungarians to have kids.
Very quick point. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think he's also happy with some of his opposition leaving the country. So,
well, there you go. There's one upside for leaders like that. Okay, we talk a lot about immigration. It's interesting that emigration comes up. All right, a lot more on Raw Politics for you. A double blow for Recep Tayyip Erdogan. How the Turkish Leaders Party could lose control of the country's two biggest cities. Plus, he played the president on television, and now he could be the president in real life. How a comedian with no political experience won over voters in Ukraine. That's coming up. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, it might be April Fool's Day, but this is no prank. A comedian with no political experience has won the first round of Ukraine's presidential elections. Early results today show that Vladimir Zelensky, with a strong lead over incumbent President Petro Poroshenko, setting the stage for a dramatic presidential runoff in 3 weeks between two men well known to the public, but for very different reasons. Now, Vladimir Zelensky is a comedian and an actor. He stars in the TV series Servant of the People, playing a school teacher who becomes president after speaking out against corruption. During the campaign, Zelensky tapped into the anti-establishment mood in Ukraine, appealing to voters fed up with corruption. All right, here with me in the studio to discuss this is Louise Hook, an expert and researcher in Eurosceptic voters and the European elections. And still with us is a Belgian MEP, Mark Demesmaeker, and our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. All right, before I go to you, Louise, with all your expertise, I'd like to ask Mark to react to this fact, this idea that an actor could win the presidential elections in Ukraine. Well, and he actually said, no promises, no disappointment. He was quoted as saying that.
Well, I've been a member of the EU-Ukraine delegation for many years, so I know the country quite well. I've travelled extensively to the country, and it comes as no surprise to me, to be honest, because people are fed up with the old generation, the old faces, really. Tymoshenko, the other candidate, and Poroshenko, who have, they took over the country after the revolution of the dignity in 2014. They have conducted a number of reforms that have not had the time really to be implemented.
But this guy has no political experience.
Yes.
Is that not worrying for you? Or is that welcome?
Yeah, for me, welcome. It's the choice of the people. And there was a time in Ukraine when elections were rigged all the times. For me, it's a pleasant surprise to see that someone like him can be elected in the first place. And again, it's the people's choice, and it's a signal that people are fed up with false promises, and that, yeah.
But how is that, though?
We should just say, I mean, Poroshenko did today interestingly say that this was
acknowledge.
He said it was a free election. So, but first of all, this is only the first round.
Yeah.
So he hasn't won.
Yes.
He hasn't won yet.
There is a second round. So Louise, when you see a candidate like this who's actually playing up the value of his ignorance, he was saying, I don't have experience, and this is actually a good thing. What does that say about why that works?
Well, I think this is exactly because people are fed up with politics as usual, and the fact that we see it not only in Ukraine, there's many places in Europe and outside Europe where this argument that somebody is going to change something and give power back to the people is really working. But
in this situation, though, it's a country, Ukraine, it is central to the relationship between Russia and the EU. Isn't this, doesn't this call for a little bit more experience in this sense?
Well, I don't think that the people see it like this. The people voting for this person really think that it will be a big change, and they like the fact that his style is different and that he speaks differently and that he has a different background. And so the fact that he is a comedian actually plays out in his advantage then. And we see it with somebody like Beppe Grillo. People were so fed up with...
it's not the first time an actor became...
Exactly, exactly.
Look at Ronald Reagan in the United States. Look at Donald Trump. I mean, look at Emmanuel Macron, that never stood for office before he became, the president of France. This isn't a novel thing, and I think what's worked in his favour is not just that he's a new face. I mean, he hasn't got any of the baggage from before in a campaign dominated by corruption, but also, interestingly, even though I think he is relatively pro-European, has talked about being more conciliatory towards Russia when it comes to the conflict in eastern Ukraine, something obviously Poroshenko is seen as a strong man. But his experience may well be tested because there are TV debates over the next couple of weeks.
And maybe we'll see a lot more of what he can bring to the table there.
When actually put under proper scrutiny.
But not having the baggage of this old politics in Ukraine can even be an advantage.
We'll have to move on to another country now, because actually Zelensky, he's not the only political outsider to have triumphed this weekend. Slovakia elected its first female president. She's a political newcomer and a lawyer. Zuzana Čaputová waged a campaign built around anti-corruption, and it struck a chord in a country still grappling with the murder of investigative journalist Jan Kuciak and his fiancée. Now, but before that, Čaputová earned the name Slovakia's Erin Brockovich for successfully stopping an illegal landfill in her hometown. Now, she triumphed over EU Commission Vice President and Energy Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič. Her victory breaks a trend in Europe that's seen right-wing populist parties rise to power.
Že sa dá ísť aj do politického zápasu s vlastným názorom, že sa dá nepodľahnúť populizmu, že sa dá hovoriť pravdu, že sa dá zaujať a získať dôveru aj bez agresívneho slovníka a podpásových osobných útokov. Naznačili to už voľby do samosprávnych krajov, potvrdili to komunálne voľby, dnes tiež voľby prezidentské a verím, že sa pridajú aj tie európske, že Slovensko si pýta túto zmenu.
All right, I'll go to you, Louise, for this
Yes.
question, because we can let's broaden it out a little bit. This is a trend we're seeing in the run-up to the European and the parliamentary elections, and it's not just about whether it's left or right. So as long as they're seen as outsiders, can you tell us, give us context on why this is happening?
Well, what I think is indeed this whole question of do we want more Europe or less Europe? Other new topics like the environment, like feminist issues, these are becoming much more important to voters, and the old topics that the center and mainstream parties are very strong on and that people know them from and attach these issues to these parties, they are becoming less important to voters.
Okay, rather than issues, what about issues?
Well, these new issues are becoming more important, and so challengers or outsiders that have the chance to really build their profile on these issues, they also stand stronger.
So is this the fuel behind populism?
I don't think this is the fuel behind populism, no, because I think there's still a big difference between populists and just challengers or outsiders. So a populist really claims to speak for the people, as opposed to all the other elitists, what they call the elite and the other political parties, so they distinguish themselves on the basis of this.
So from a politician's point of view, is this a sign of what we are about to see in campaigns unfolding?
I think it depends on the context of the country involved here. Like in Ukraine, which I know quite well, you had the context of, indeed, corruption going on, and despite the promises of the...
What about here in the European Union?
Well, what we have seen here is, indeed, a more volatile landscape. You used to be born as in a socialist family or a Christian Democrat or liberal family. That was the case in Belgium.
And
the three
everyone voted the same way.
You voted the same way. This has completely, this has changed, of course. The public or the voters can change from one election to the other in a dramatic way. That's what we've seen. Also, the media context is completely different with social media. You see it also in Slovakia and Ukraine, where the mainstream media are in the hands of the old elite. But despite that, the newcomers are able to break through.
This is not the only time in history that we've ever seen, protest votes or people voting against.
No, and it's not, or dramatic
it's a common reaction,
new characters coming. But it comes back to, something that I've been saying. I think we are going to see. You're right. Clearly every EU country is different and there are local forces at play, even in the rise of populism. But I also think we might well see a little bit of a backlash against the backlash, which I keep talking about. But it's essentially that there is a middle ground or a liberal strain of voters out there who actually are starting to become a lot more active against populism.
Right.
And it's not just in Slovakia, though the environment there is more conducive to it because there's not been the clampdown on the media or the rule of law that we've seen elsewhere. But you look, we've got an openly...
They also present themselves as outsiders, and they present themselves as parties that have a different style, that are fresh and young, and they also try to ride this wave of people want to see change, people are...
It's just a different type of change.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you look, you've got a gay mirror in a city in Poland. You've got momentum making a little bit of inroad in Hungary. There are changes, more significant in Slovakia than elsewhere. But I do suspect we will see
the first time
changes.
that there is a female president. I think these things are also relevant, and this is also like a sign of change, indeed. Yes,
it's almost seeming like a pendulum. It's just when you say backlash against a backlash, it almost seems like it's just going one way or the other and finding a middle ground.
I see more as kind of the center is breaking apart, and people are more polarizing on different topics, and it's either one-sided, like in France, we've seen Marine Le Pen against Macron.
For sure.
And this competition is becoming much more important.
If one thing is certain, I think the elections now seem to be really exciting.
Yes.
No, it's not going to be dull. All right, well, Slovakia and Ukraine are the only countries seeing election shake-ups. In Turkey, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's party appears to have fallen out of favor in two of the country's most important cities.
Her kazanç ve her kayıp milletimizin takdiridir. Bu da tabii demokrasinin bir gereğidir.
A sobering result for Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. His ruling AK party lost control of the capital Ankara for the first time in nearly 2 decades, and an opposition party is claiming victory in Istanbul. The defeat comes after local elections amid a painful recession and financial crisis in Turkey. And with 9 other cities looking set to fall, could this be the beginning of the end for Erdogan? After 16 years, is he losing his grip on power? That's the question, is he?
I think the answer to that is no.
No. Okay.
I mean, this is a significant change. I was in Istanbul a couple of weeks ago. There was an awful lot of campaigning on Erdogan's side. But actually, there has been this shift, and it's, what's happening in Turkey. The economy's in real difficulty. It's essentially in recession for the first time in 10 years. That is going to hit any incumbent leader. But be in no doubt, I mean, given where he is now constitutionally as president and given how entrenched he is, I don't think we're going to see any marked change. And actually, his party overall did not do that badly. It still got the most number of votes across the country. But this is a blow. It's definitely a blow. And actually, he was quite kind of meat by it almost in some ways.
So is it just very quickly, does it mean that economic unemployment and the currency problems is just take precedence over ideology or other ways of getting people to support you?
Could be. Anyway, I think after all what we've seen, the repression and the concentration of power under Erdogan, this might give, I hope, some oxygen to civil society and to those who oppose this kind of this regime, which is autocratic more and more.
All right.
So I was always thought that politics is always bread and butter. It always comes back to bread and butter. What you can put in your mouth, whether you can feed yourself.
Basics.
I mean, that is the basics, and that's why that's what often influences people's votes, the economy.
Okay, we've got a lot more on the program for you tonight. Fresh calls to regulate Facebook from Facebook. Why Mark Zuckerberg is asking governments and regulators around the world to rein in his own company. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the program. There was an unexpected message from Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg over the weekend. He asked for more government regulation of the internet. Alex Morgan and our team in theCUBE have more on this story. Alex?
Well, Tessa, how's this for regulation role reversal when it comes to Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg? Obviously, remember these scenes from last year. Mark Zuckerberg sat before Congress, testifying in front of Congress, also coming to Europe to answer to MEPs as well. The pressure on Mark Zuckerberg then to defend Facebook against a series of allegations and calls for more regulation. Well, in a surprise post over the weekend, Mark Zuckerberg, he's turned the tables. He has asked politicians to step up their efforts to regulate the internet. That means Facebook. Now, look at this here. This is a quote just from the opening of that article. Lawmakers often tell me we have too much power over speech. And look at this bit at the bottom there. And frankly, I agree. Pretty extraordinary stuff to hear from Mark Zuckerberg. And he put forward a 4-point plan to regulate the internet. This is all pretty extraordinary stuff. So let's jump in and bring you perhaps some of the main points from that. The largest section, the first section, harmful content. Now, here Mark Zuckerberg saying politicians should step up their efforts to help companies like Facebook define what counts as propaganda, what counts as terrorist content, hate speech, etc., saying that it's impossible to take down all of this content, that Facebook's getting a lot of experts in, but admitting mistakes have been made, they will be made, but that politicians should help define the framework, if you like, so companies like Facebook can follow it. And just on this point, it is interesting. As we say, hugely significant site, Facebook, and constantly evolving on this point, announcing in the wake of the New Zealand massacre, the shooting in Christchurch, that they would now be taking down all white nationalist speech from the site, classifying it as hate speech. Previously, there'd been a grey area here as deciding whether or not it should be considered as hate speech or political speech, but now Facebook making this decision. But for these kind of calls, Mark Zuckerberg saying it's politicians who should be getting involved. Let's move on to the second point. We've heard a lot of this with the European elections coming up. Election protection. But this time, Mark Zuckerberg wants laws, new laws put in place, not just for elections, but to help fight misinformation campaigns which are politically motivated, say on issues like immigration, security, that may not be linked directly to a candidate or an election. The theme through all this, politicians, you give us a map and we'll follow it. That's sort of the theme I'm getting from this. Then the last 2 points here, really you can see these as a direct response to the Cambridge Analytica scandal. GDPR, support for GDPR expressed by Mark Zuckerberg. Remember, that's Europe's really tough new data protection laws. And also, Mark Zuckerberg wants common rules about who's responsible for transferring data. So are politicians, Tessa, jumping at the chance to set the rules for Facebook? Not necessarily. Let's just bring you up a couple of reactions, if I might, to finish. Damian Collins, UK MP, investigated Facebook, saying here, well, Mark Zuckerberg could start by coming to the House of Commons and actually speaking to British MPs. He's been invited. He's not taken up that offer. And then just bringing you to a Dutch Liberal here saying this is a ploy from Facebook, or a new play from Facebook to, if you like, put the blame somewhere else. It's about changing where people are focusing, saying, actually, Facebook's record is consistently lobbying against more regulation, but saying here people should be looking at this very seriously. So when we look at Facebook, Tessa, we see it's facing problems like all social media giants are. This letter from Mark Zuckerberg, interesting to see what more politicians will make of it as time goes on.
Thanks for that, Alex, and our team in theCUBE. And joining us in the studio to discuss this is Claude Moraes. He's a British MEP with the Socialists and Democrats group. Marietje Schaake, Dutch MEP with the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats. And Sam Stolten, tech reporter from Euractiv. Sam, I'll start with you. Is this Facebook reacting to the backlash it has received most recently from the New Zealand attacks? Or is it trying to set its own terms, like, OK, you want to regulate us, but we'll help you write the rules?
I think partly, yes. I'm not sure how sincere Mark Zuckerberg is in this respect. He's jumping on the bandwagon in terms of calling for regulation. I mean, this is a very fashionable thing to do, and thus far EU commissioners have held back a bit in terms of calling for further measures to be imposed on the platforms. But could it be an inevitability? Zuckerberg thinks so, and he's trying to get in there before anyone else to kind of claim this as his own.
It's quite if you look at it, it's quite a brilliant strategy, don't you think? I don't know, Marietje, what do you think of Zuckerberg's move?
Well, he's lost a lot of trust by all the misinformation and sort of intransparency that he's displayed when very dramatic things happened, like the Cambridge Analytica scandal, but also paying teenagers for access to their most private information. So I think nobody sees this at face value anymore. But what I think is crucial is that if Facebook indeed cares so much about the rule of law, which I think every company should, they can begin respecting it today. It is not like there are no laws. Of course there are laws. And Facebook can say, look, our terms of use are now going to be aligned with these and these hate speech laws, with these and these anti-discrimination laws, with these freedom of expression laws. These are the laws that we're going to take as our anchor. They don't have to wait for so much to happen anew. What they should do, and I think that that's also missing from this post by Mark Zuckerberg, is take local context into account. Because if he's going to talk about measures to ensure electoral integrity in another country, that could be used to silence the opposition. So you need to have very clear anchors along which you're going to act with or without regulators like us doing more.
So they are still facing investigations and potential fines.
Because there are laws.
Exactly.
It's not like we live in the land of the jungle, contrary to how it sometimes seems.
I mean, he faces more than just fines. I think the strategy is a much deeper strategy than that, because what is happening with Facebook is that they are so immense and what they do is so profound. For example, you see the United States elections are probably going to go into 2020 with the same terrain, the same vulnerability to hacking from Russia than they had in the last election. Our European elections are very vulnerable. So we see that very little has changed. So what is happening is that Facebook now are adopting a strategy which says we know that the European Union, for example, one of the 3 big regulators in the world, can now adopt antitrust, monopoly, tax type regulation. But Facebook doesn't want to get into that. Facebook is big.
It wants to.
It's not. Exactly.
Conspicuously absent.
He wants to stay. He wants to stay in this area, the soft area. If I give you a very, very basic example, he came here and he loved GDPR. Of course, everyone loves it. They all love our EU GDPR. They said it in the Senate. Of course, what he doesn't like is e-privacy legislation or any legislation to do with any of his other platforms or anything to do with artificial. Exactly, and he hasn't taken down, many of the apps which are causing the problems, and that is the issue.
To take your point, Claude, you brought up the fact that they are immense. They're so large. So how do you, in fact, regulate something that's borderless, that's this big? Just how?
Well, effectively, that's what he's calling for. He's calling for more common global standards.
A global standard?
A global standard,
okay.
yes. That's,
implemented by states?
It can be implemented worldwide, essentially. So he's calling for a common agreement in this area. But the issue is, and I do agree with Claude on this point, that he's trying to divert attention from other controversial areas to do with Facebook and, trying to... I mean, this is a communications campaign, effectively, by Facebook.
This is a major shift because Facebook is going to be in danger of being out of business. Because remember, it's also to do with Instagram, WhatsApp and the other platforms.
They're taking it on.
And that is a monopolising position for Facebook. And they are also afraid of what comes after GDPR.
Is this a PR exercise, Maricha?
Well, a few weeks ago, he announced that he is going to focus only on privacy. And you can see a contrast here, a conflict really, between the two. Because if he is going to allow for increasingly private messaging, then it will become harder to look at what people are going to say. So if there would be more laws then on content, it would also impact Facebook's competitors who are actually moving away from public platform discussions and messaging. So I think it is indeed a business strategy. It could be clever, but it could also really be kind of a null and void kind of comment because we have to do our jobs anyway. Let's not get distracted by what he said.
But having said that, I mean, I personally, just to be positive for a moment, I personally would say it's good to take down white nationalist sites.
Sure.
There is a problem. So let's just be also clear that much good that Facebook can do, because it's so immense,
so it has to play a role in whatever...
So it has to happen, yes. He has to be engaged.
Just very quickly, we're running out of time, but is that, just to play the other side, isn't a global standard actually a good thing?
No, because the majority of the world doesn't have freedom of expression protection. And if we're going to take a global standard, it will be more authoritarian.
OK, well, we've run out of time on this topic tonight. We have a lot more coming up for you, because as the Brexit chaos continues, we do want to know what you think about a soft Brexit. Is it the best option, or is that a betrayal? Your call is coming up at 7 p.m. CET, and as always, we do want to hear from you. So the contact information, you can see it on your screen. The number is 00800 3333 7002, and it's free. You can get in on the debate. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics. Our lines are open now.
I'm sick of the tantrums. I'm sick of the rudeness to her.
We need someone who understands international politics and to put Britain back on the map.
It's not clear who would emerge as a result of Theresa May leaving.
Frankly, the Tory party is riddled with idiots.
To be a politician, you need to have a very thick skin.
Thank you for calling in, Janice.
And we need thick skins to put up with you lot.
All right, so what we saw there was just some of the highlights from the last Your Call show that we did in Strasbourg last week. And when just after Theresa May announced that she would resign, people from across Europe dialed in to have their say on whether it would help break the Brexit deadlock. Now, tonight, we're doing it all over again, and we need to hear from you. I'm now joined by a British MEP, Claude Moraes, and Beatrice Rios from Euractiv, and still with us, Darren McCaffrey, our political editor. So, Darren, everybody here will be on the Your Call show tonight. What are we talking about, Darren?
We're talking about a whole range of issues. Yes, a little bit of Brexit, because we can't get away from that. But also talking about whether you actually are attracted by politicians who potentially are a little bit different or new or have not been involved in politics before. And indeed, this issue of immigration versus emigration. Are you concerned? Which one are you concerned about? Let's have a look.
So the noes have it, the noes have it.
We've heard lots of noes from MPs, but tonight, might we finally get a yes? MPs will have another chance to vote on a customs union with the EU. It's the Brexit destination which came closest to passing last week. But it's a softer Brexit than Theresa May would like, depriving the UK of control over its own trade policy, key demand for Brexiteers. So, a soft Brexit. Is it the best option or betrayal? Comedian Volodymyr Zelensky played the president at a popular Ukrainian TV show. But now his political ambitions are no joke. He could be about to do it for real after coming out on top in the first round of Ukraine's presidential election. Meanwhile, in Slovakia, the anti-corruption lawyer Zuzana Chapatova has won a country's presidential vote, also lacking political experience of high office. Is political experience overrated? In the wake of the migration crisis and amid debates over a borderless Europe, the issue of immigration tends to rank high among the concerns of Europeans. But what about emigration? It turns out southern and eastern European countries are more concerned about people leaving than coming in. That's according to a survey of 14 countries by the European Council on Foreign Relations. So we want to know what's on your minds. Are you worried about immigration or emigration? Have your say, Europe. Soft Brexit. Best option or betrayal? Is political experience overrated? And are you worried about immigration or emigration? And you know what to do. Pick up the phone. It is free. You've got no reason not to. The number you should know by now, surely. 00800 333 3702. You can email us at rawpoll@euronews.com. Get in touch via social media, Twitter, Facebook. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics. Or we'd love to see you as well. Get on Skype and use
join the
Raw Politics as a handle.
All right, I'll go to Beatrice on this. You were talking about this earlier, Darren, the emigration and immigration. This is an interesting poll to come out, and you know, people are actually worried about emigration, people leaving the country. Yeah,
indeed, and that's an issue in Spain. We have been having, because of the economic crisis, we have been having thousands of people leaving the country because of the problems to find a job, because they would find a job, but the conditions would be not in line with what they would expect it, and that has an economic impact, of course, in the country as well, because we have the best people of our country leaving into another place where they can actually get the job they actually want.
Would that be a post-Brexit problem for the UK?
I think it's a big problem we just don't talk about. I had a blue card piece of legislation which has just been dumped unceremoniously. Nobody's talking about it. Spent 2 years on it. This would allow high-skilled workers to come into the EU. There are whole tracks of the European Union now where you have this demographic problem, but all we hear is about migration across the Mediterranean. And it's really good that you've raised this, because I spend a lot of time now in Romania because of the presidency. The #1 problem in Romania,
it's a
all the
brain
young
drain,
people
isn't
have
it?
gone.
Yeah.
And of course I represent London. A lot of them are there. They're really talented people from the country. So of course this is the hidden issue.
I mean, that really is interesting. So we'd like to know what you think about this. We always talk about immigration, and now we're talking about emigration. So do get in touch and join this conversation later on your call. The number to call is 00800 3333 7002. The email address is rawpoll@euronews.com. And we're always checking social media. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics or look for us on Skype as well. All right. It is time now for tonight's Raw Moment. Before we go, Jean-Claude Juncker says that he is growing impatient, waiting to hear the word yes from the British Parliament. And after these last few weeks, can you really blame him? Let's take a look.
The ayes to the right, 202. The noes to the left, 432. So the noes have it, the noes have it. Unlock! So the noes have it, the noes have it. Unlock! So the noes have it. 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 The little
So is this the night we finally hear a yes? Anyone can hazard a guess?
Are we allowed to hazard a guess that? I think we might do. I think it is possible that they may well back a customs union. The question then, of course, is will there be a no in response to that from the UK government? Because irrespective of what happens tonight, Theresa May and the government don't actually really need to take any notice of it because it's only an indicative vote. But the man who's almost become a champion to some, a villain to others, but one of the most recognisable faces in Europe is the Speaker, John Bercow, roaring at the top of his voice, order! Order!
And a no, a lot of no's. All right, again, we'd like to hear from you. Join in the debate after the show and for your call. And do tell us what you were thinking or talking about. You can find me at Tessa Arcilia or go to @Euronews and use the hashtag #RawPolitics. So don't forget, stay tuned and bye for now.